Hi, welcome to Guts and Glory, the podcast which delves deep into the complex world of gastrointestinal and HPB disorders. Join me every month, wherein we unravel the mysteries of these complex issues in candid conversations with leading experts who share their experiences, tackle contentious topics, and provide cutting edge insights. I'm Sadiq Sikora, and this is Guts and Glory. Welcome to the podcast Guts and Glory, wherein we decode the mysteries of complex GI and HPV problems. Of course, today is a bit different. We are going to look at another aspect of surgery, which is the non technical skills. Some may frown on this, but you will know from the experts that how important this skill is also in line with the surgical skills that you develop. And I have two very, very interesting guests on this podcast. To introduce them, I'll take the liberty to introduce Kenneth Walker first. He's a colorectal surgeon and he calls himself a trainer, which I've experienced firsthand. His interest is in colorectal surgery, and he's been trained in Scotland, and he spent and served in Australia and Nepal. He feels that there are significant lacunae and gaps in some of the training that we give, which has sort of initiated him to develop certain programs which integrate the clinical, non-technical skills, technical skills, and also developing the aptitude to deal with complications, resilience in this practice. He presently is a professor of surgical education at the Royal College of Surgeons, Edinburgh, and he co-leads in surgical education and innovation lab in the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. And I must say, we've had some fantastic conversations, Ken, if you remember, and his interest in knots is just unbelievable. And his insights would be what we are going to tap into this. He co-leads the international group for the knots and also is been involved with this for almost a decade. So welcome, Ken, on this podcast. And it's going to be a fantastic conversation from what I know of this.
Thank you, Sadiq. Namaste. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. And from the other end of the globe is, let me get this right, Yap Chi Lung, or CL as we call him. CL also has been trained in Malaysia and then in UK and has wears several hats. He is the upper GI surgeon and also deals with obesity surgery, and he practices in Kuala Lumpur. Ken and CL co-lead the international group of NOTSS, and he's also the lead person for NOTSS in Malaysia. Thank you very much for joining for this podcast and sharing your time on this. So let me begin with asking, I mean, it's always this thing that what is NOTSS? I mean, we know it's non-technical skills for surgeons, but what exactly is it? And why is it so important, according to the experts like you, to have this skill in surgeons? So I want to start from there to get the ball rolling. Ken.
Oh, well, thanks, Sadiq. Yeah, you've touched on something. Some people have commented it's unusual to have a skill that's defined by something it's not. But of course, surgeons are so used to talking about the technical skills of what we do with our hands. This is more, the non-technical skills are a collection of cognitive and social skills, what goes on in our heads and what goes on between us in a team that affect, that underpin. So they're the cognitive and social skills that underpin optimal surgical performance. There are lots of misconceptions people have about what that might mean. Some people call them the soft skills. It's not a term I particularly like because they're
Yeah.
quite hard in the sense they're quite difficult sometimes, and also they're quite hard in the sense that they can be really the thing that makes the difference between life and death for our patients, make the
Yes.
difference to our well-being. Some people think that this is about consultations with patients. No, I mean we have some other courses on that, but this is really about the the situation awareness, decision making, communication, teamwork, and leadership within a surgical team. It's validated in the operating room, although it's useful in other settings as well. And it arose from studies in Aberdeen, University of Aberdeen, and Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. Some 20 years ago now, this conversation began, which we can talk about if you like, but it's really rooted in what we now call safety one thinking, thinking about what goes wrong in surgery and why, and also safety two thinking, what goes right, all the things that could go wrong and don't. So that's really what non-technical skills for surgeons means to me. Some of us, we kind of know, I think, when we see the right stuff in
Yeah.
a colleague, but we
Yes.
may have struggled to have the language or the taxonomy, the system, the framework to describe it, particularly, to describe it using behavioral science. So
Yeah.
that's what
I
NOTSS is
think
to me.
most often, as you rightly pointed out, we get confused and put everything in the same basket, that is interaction with patients, grief
Yeah,
counseling, and things like that. But this is a specific thing about the team which is working in the operating theater, right?
correct.
Uh, so I want to ask both of you that you both are leaders in NOTS. So was it love at first sight when you sort of encountered this course, or it gradually grew onto you and you realized the significance of that?
Uh, Maybe I'll answer that
Yeah.
first, if I
Yes.
may.
Yeah.
Um, well, yeah. Now you're mentioning that it's love at first sight. Now I have to say that yes, probably is. Yeah. So I was first introduced this uh, in 2010, so it's about 11 or 15 years ago, and I was lucky enough to do my fellowship in the UK Royal Infirmary of Edinburgh, and my direct mentor, who is Mr. Simon Patterson Brown, is the pioneer of this NOTS program in UK under the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. So when I attended the course, then there are a lot of things going in my mind. It's like a deja vu. The the story that they was telling in the master class, the video that they're showing, it reflect back all the things that have gone wrong throughout my career. It might not be mine, but might be my colleague, my trainer, my consultant.
Yes.
And then I realized that if all of us or all my consultant have attended this course, they would have prevented the complications. There are so many things that, this thing happened. Oh, I've seen this before. Something like this had happened before.
Yeah.
So I started to read more, and I see my mentor every day, Simon Patterson Brown, in the hospital, because so I started asking questions, and he is a true leader as well. So he led by example. The way he communicates, the way he handles things, the way he handles situation. I slowly learn things from him. So that's how I fell in love in this
Right.
non-technical skill. Yeah.
Right.
I don't know about you, Ken.
What about you, Ken? How
Love
did
at
it come
first sight.
about?
I would say yes and no. I mean, I think my first exposure to knots, there was a definite sense of, yes, this is the thinking, this is the language we've been looking for. But on the other hand, you do need to, I'm not sure I really got it at the first exposure. You really need to consider these things, look at them from different angles a few times before you really begin to get into it. So I think I grew into love with knots, but it was definitely addressing the real needs in terms of patient safety, in terms of our well-being. My first exposure was I was one of the surgeons involved in the um, early studies looking at the preliminary videos. I wasn't one of the pioneers. That's really Steve Yule, Professor Rona Flynn, George Youngson, Simon Patterson Brown. These people
Right.
really pioneered it back at the start. But I was one of those involved, and I thought, yes, there's something here. And as I slowly got deeper into it, I suppose like really good relationships, I grew into love with it.
I must say that for me, what happened was I was asked to deliver a talk in Asia Pacific in Bali, which was online at that time. And they
Mm,
asked me to talk about communication in surgeons, uh, in surgery and among surgeons.
mhm,
And then when I was going through uh, the literature, and I came across this knots thing over and over again and again. And I wrote to Stephen Yule. Of course, I didn't get an answer because I think he had moved to Harvard,
mm,
so on and so forth. But that's what generated, and I think then I got together with you guys, and then we started the program in India. So
mm.
was it love at first sight? Uh, it was love after seeing the full picture for me, actually. But no doubt that once you see that, you realize the potential and the importance of that in what we do day in and out. And we do
Mm.
all these things, but, and that's what I want to ask you that, you know, there are several components which you people have described as components generally as cognitive and social skill, and then subsequent taxonomy which has been developed. So I want you to elaborate a bit on the components which are important in knots. Is this taxonomy proprietary?
Well, the components really arise from, in the early studies, that was Steve Yule's PhD back in the day, 20 years ago, with Rona Flynn, who headed the occupational psychology department in Aberdeen, and with a group of surgeons, as we've mentioned. After looking at the literature, observational studies in various surgical theatres, structured interviews, it came down to a series of behavioural markers, and that forms the taxonomy. And his PhD really came down to one table, um,
Yeah.
was the four categories, the two um, cognitive skills, situation awareness and decision making, each of which have elements, So for situation awareness, for example, it's about perceiving, understanding the significance, and projecting forwards. Um, so each of them has these elements. So the categories are situation awareness and decision making, and the social ones are communication and teamwork and leadership. These are the areas it was identified where things go wrong, where there are biases and traps again and again that you can see emerging if you analyze adverse events, or if you analyze good saves, as it were. Um, and each of these have elements. The cognitive ones are harder to observe. The social ones are relatively easy to see going on. And in addition, in the most recent version of the NOTSS Masterclass, there's an additional session. So there are those four sessions: situation awareness, decision making, communication and teamwork, and leadership. But there's an additional section on cognitive load,
Notes.
because it really
Mhm.
affects our situation awareness and decision making. So those are the sections that we cover, and I could expand on them if you like. But is it proprietary? There's a whole host of things available, and they all complement one another in this field. I wouldn't say it's proprietary, but it is unique to have this taxonomy, which is the most validated taxonomy there is.
But
In each of those categories, Sadiq, just to give a flavor, our situation awareness may be intrinsically, our brains are very good at this, but we are prone to lots of traps and biases, especially if we are stressed or hungry or angry,
yes,
late, tired,
yeah,
dehydrated.
yeah,
And there are tools, and there are situationally aware behaviors, scanning and asking questions, using a sterile cockpit moment. These are things which
Yes.
would mean things to people if they come on the course. In decision making, there are different types of decision making, and we need to be ready to flit between the two, that business of slowing down when we should, which is a very safe behavior. Um, in cognitive load, there are lots of ways in which I think I've spent most of my career coming to the operating theatre not optimized. I might have just opened a disturbing email before operating, or had a change in the list. There are ways to mitigate all that. And similarly, in communication and teamwork, there are all these common traps, but there are
Yes. Yeah.
tools, SBAR and closed loop
Yeah.
communication, and all these little tools that just make life safer. So that just gives a flavor of the sort.
Yeah.
A colleague once asked me, why do we have to make a thing of this? Isn't this common sense? I don't know if this is
Yeah.
what you're getting
Yeah.
at, Sadiq. Isn't this common sense? Don't we teach this already?
Yeah.
And I guess my answer to this colleague was, well, we make a thing of it to make a thing of it, um, to draw attention and to say that there is this validated tool. And some of these skills don't come as easily to me as they might to you, I said to this
Yeah.
colleague. And we do have to work on these skills. And you can imagine if there was a drug or a device that you'd identified that made the difference to patient outcomes, you would never agree to operate without it, would you? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
I mean, honestly, when I attend or be part of these courses, I more often than not realize the shortcomings which I have uh,
me
while
too.
dealing in a group or a surgical team. And it always reminds me that however much you think that you're doing everything perfectly, there's still much to desire to be done. But I want to ask CL that how long have you been doing this? And uh, has the course changed over a period of time?
Yeah, I started to do this after I came back to Kuala Lumpur. That was actually 10, 10 years ago. And when I when I was about to come back, Simon Peterson Brown gave me a whole stack of the little booklet. He said, "Do you still have any more uh, space in your luggage? Can you bring this?" I remember about 20 over booklet, and then see what you can do with this. So I came back. I went to one of my professor in the university. I spoke to her. I had a chat with her. Her name is Professor April. Then I started to have a chat with the president of the College of Malaysia. I said, "Oh, this is something good. We should try doing something." The following year is our annual scientific meeting of the College of Surgeons of Malaysia, and we invited Simon Peterson Brown to come over to run our first NOTSS masterclass. We had the introductory course half day to the trainee, and subsequently the next day was a full day masterclass. It was well received. In fact, next year, 2025, is our 10-year anniversary of NOTSS masterclass in Malaysia,
Wow.
which we
Wow.
are going to do something special to celebrate this. In fact, we are planning
Absolutely.
to have Simon and Steve to come over if possible, or some yeah. So since then, we started to build our faculty, local faculty, and we're running this course 2-3 times a year, and then started to grow up to 7 or 8 times a year. And then few years ago, I think the NOTS in the Royal College of Surgeons started to form a committee, and me and Ken was somehow selected to lead this subgroup, the NOTS International. So we have been trying to run this course to coordinate the NOTS masterclasses globally.
Right.
So I think the slight change, there was a new slide set which was introduced last year after the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh celebrated the 20th anniversary. So hence the new slide sets, which is quite standardized everywhere that we go. But one thing that I realized that changed me, the way that I teach, the way that I run the courses, is because I'm starting to go to different places, different country. Initially, I was in UK. Then I came back to Malaysia. I sort of tailored it to the local setting in Malaysia. But now I'm starting to go to India, to Nepal, Indonesia, Manila, and everywhere has a different culture, different work culture, and obviously language is different and so on. And I'm starting also to learn myself to how to tailor and adapt to the local scenario in different countries. So yeah, even though the slide stats is the same, but the way I communicate, the way I present, the way I talk is I'm starting to learn to adapt to the local scenario.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So, Ken, what I want to understand is that you say it is important, you've been with it, but can you tell us so that it sort of increases the impact by telling us how it has, I mean, tangibly affected your practice? Like, these are the changes you have brought in your practice, or this is the thing which led you to sort of salvage a situation. Because that will give us a sense, that how important this is with developing your practice.
Yeah. I would say probably the most, I mean, you've got to remember that back in, I suppose it was 2006, I first came across this, and we, at that point, we didn't even have a standardized surgical pause. So there have been a lot of systems changes. If you want to make things safer and there's a systems change you can make, you should do that
Yes,
as your first step before even alongside behavioral changes, because it'll be much more reliable and reproducible. So we have a lot of systems changes around how we do our surgical pauses and so on. Certain, first of all, for example, in an M&M meeting, we will actually ask, okay, such and such a complication arose, so and so happened. Why? We'll ask why in a much more intelligent and deep way, and we might ask why. If you ask why once or twice, we used to get it, well, it was somebody's fault. But we'd
yeah,
never get to the root causes of why, nobody went to work deliberately
yeah,
to do something suboptimal. So we start to ask why a bit deeper and a bit more intelligently. That's one thing. But even in the operating room, I can see differences. I think we're working with now with teams that understand how they're what affects each other's performance. So you won't get the same kind of maximal noise at the same time as you're trying to do an anastomosis. Or if you do, you've got a tool you can call for say, can we have a focus time or a sterile cockpit, is the word we use for that. You suddenly get people who are more empowered to speak up if they see something that's not right. Um, we seem to, I think, have more agile teams that are ready to stop, change gear, have a think, review things, um, maybe regroup if they're in a crisis. I think we even have managers who now understand the impact on us of changes to the list on, well, perhaps I don't think perhaps we don't have all of that, but we're we're
Those
on.
are the evolved managers which you
And
have.
then another significant change, I think, is recognizing, we talked about the cognitive load section, people are understanding now that I think your working memory that you need to make decisions is finite. It can be filled up. It can be shrunk by things, particularly stressor things like, for example, rudeness, even particularly just very subtle rudeness, as well as, I suppose, more concrete examples where if we do a handover phone call, we might use a structure called SBAR, situation, background, assessment, recommendation. So I think these are the kind of concrete things. We could talk about the evidence that they make a difference to outcomes, but these are the things I observe.
CL, what you personally have encountered or experienced changes or brought about changes in your practice, being a teacher of NOTS for a significant period of time?
So what I echo what Ken has just said. But one obvious thing that I have actually observed, at least in my country, because I mentioned that we have been doing this for nearly 10 years in Malaysia. We sort of have taught non-technical skill for a certain at least one or two generations of surgeons, and now they used to be junior trainee 10 years ago, and now they're consultant. And I still go back to the university to teach and to operate, and I can see that they are aware of this non-technical skill. They're aware of the importance of non-technical skill. They themselves are, even though the current trainee has not gone to the NOTSS masterclass, they themselves are teaching them
Right.
in the operation theatre, in the ward round, and they themselves are leading by example. So the working culture, I mean, it's sort of like changing the whole, you just, things are just spread like wildfire.
Right.
This thing, that's what I could observe. In terms of practice myself, I also feel that it make me a better person, make me a better surgeon. At least that's what I feel.
Yeah, excellent. But, having gone through some of these courses and being part of it, one of the things which keeps on bothering me is that how do you measure or quantify the fact that the person attending the course has acquired the requisite skills? I mean, is it something which you do once and then you say, oh, you've acquired these skills and you're certified for this? How does it work, Ken?
Well, first of all, it's definitely not a one-time vaccination or immunization against trouble. And these things really need to be revisited. So in our program, we'll introduce them in first year residency, and then maybe do a master class a few years later, and we'll have some simulations in between. And that's been my experience, in that I grow each time I consider these. Each time we deliver a masterclass, we learn ourselves. I think in terms of quantifying the improvement, I think perhaps the key thing here is that this was designed and validated as a behavioral rating tool. These were behavioral markers that were identified and then built into a taxonomy, a framework that can be used for debriefing. And so it can be used to do a debrief or an observation of somebody's non-technical skills during an operation. We actually use it for simulated ward rounds as well. Studies, there are more than 100 papers that validate NOTSS as a tool for different uses. And one of them is in team training, and there's lots of evidence, not just from here, but particularly from the States, from Karen Mazzoccio's group and others, of the difference that team training makes to patient outcomes. If you get this behavioral marker risk index is low, the patient outcomes are better. So we know we're dealing with a robust tool, and we know we can use it for rating and debrief and feedback for individuals.
What do you feel about this, CL? That is it, is it quantifiable, measurable? Because, why I ask this is that I've seen in the meeting last course, our residents attended, and then often I have to remind them that, didn't you attend the masterclass? So, how does it work? Do you give them a certificate and say you have aced the NOTSS skill?
Well, this is not like what Ken just mentioned. This is not a one-shot immunity. This is an ongoing thing, and they need to how they bring themselves throughout the career, and the career is lifelong career. So how they deal with different situation with this kind of value that they just learn. So that is the most important thing, and they want to improve themselves, and better still, if they are interested, they're going to read more and try to instill those value on themselves.
So Ken, in your, like, say, in your hospital, when you have trainees and all, how often do you do the assessment of, say, non-technical skills? Is it like we have each semester or at the end of the training, or do you do it all?
Yes, we do, but not as often as we intend. I confess. I have to say you've pricked my conscience because it's being underused, to be very honest.
In our place, what it has initiated are at least two things. That we've started doing a morning huddle, and
Mm,
that includes the anesthetists, the operating theater staff, the residents, and we go through the list. The time required, any specific equipment required, and so on. And it's sort of caught on now, and we feel very comfortable doing that so that everyone is on the same page, which is
mm,
part of this, that organizing the thing. And the second thing which we have brought about is debriefing.
mm,
So we have an event or so, and we got through it in some way or the other. But the next morning, not immediately, we have a morning session, and it says that we ended up with this. Why? What could we have done? How did we? So
mm.
I think in this thing, these two things have been added, uh, maybe as a consequence of my introduction to knots, I
That's
feel.
that's really good, Sadiq, because if you look across the world, the WHO checklist is pretty universal. But
Yes.
what's less universal is debriefing at the end. And as you said, having a brief, a team brief before the whole list when you can establish a shared mental model of what you're trying to achieve. So yeah,
So we were trying
that's
to,
less universal. So that's good to hear.
yeah. So we were trying to look at individuals. Now I want to ask the same question, that the knots course or the components of knots, when it is, how it has impacted outcomes in patients. So is there, again, evidence? You did mention, CL, that there is some evidence. So uh, if you could just highlight that, what kind of evidence in terms of saying that this is how it has impacted the outcome in these kind of situations, or these group of uh, surgical practice, say orthopedic practice, general surgery practice, or colorectal, geriatric practice.
We look at when you ask anybody who have attended this course, generally, I'm not talking the evidence first. Uh, a lot of people would have realized this, saying that, oh, uh, my that patient would not have suffered this complication if communication was better, or decision making was okay. So retrospectively, I would say almost all the attendees would have felt the same individual. But we look at the evidence. There quite evident, a lot of evidence, especially by Steve Yu. There, I mean, in our slides, we give an example where in UK, a group of vascular surgeons, they were rating their non-technical skill, and they found their risk of complication is much lower. This is in UK, and also another paper that he showed was a group of cardiothoracic surgeons in America. When their not non-technical skills rating is higher, their complication rate is lower, and their mortality rate is also lower. So these are the evidence that has been published.
You were
Yeah.
Yes.
mentioning about behavioral risk index and team training having an impact on Ken.
Yes, I echo what CL says, and we each have these in our own experience. I can remember being called into gynecology theatre, a young woman having a laparoscopy for pelvic pain, and it turned out to be a Crohn's phlegmon in the terminal ileum, and would I resect it and anastomose. And I think I didn't quite really get all the information and appreciate that she'd been malnourished for a while. So when we did anastomose her, of course, she got a leak and struggled with that leak. And maybe our fear of giving an unannounced stoma had, well, maybe it would have been better to do so. And when I think of all the different factors in the lead up to how we get that information, how we receive that information, how we look at it in this three-stage situation awareness, all that makes me think that while on the face of it an anastomotic leak is a kind of recognized
Yes,
complication,
in
it
Crohn's.
can actually be avoidable in this setting, or at least the risk can be mitigated or reduced. So, and that stands, so personal experience stands beside the evidence that CL's just given.
Thing,
Um,
I came across some evidence which said that team training makes an
yes,
impact.
yes, the
So,
behavioral marker
like,
risk index
yes.
you asked about.
So we as a team went to Korea when we were starting our liver transplant program, and anesthetists, surgeons, radiology, and hepatologists, we all went together, and so there was a team training kind of thing, which
Yeah.
said, but uh, it made a big difference because we were all on the same page and not trained from different areas, and we were all together. At
Mm,
the end of the day, we could discuss out and this
mm.
thing. So, I mean, that's also part of non-technical skills,
Technical
isn't it?
skills, yes.
To have a team which understands what they're doing and be on the same page, isn't it?
Yes, again, there's an art form to how you do a brief or how you establish a shared mental model, how the things that alert you to the fact that we may not be on the same page. Somebody's asking a strange question. Let's not get irritated by that. Let's explore that. I may be asking a wrong question of them, and the same happens vice versa. The art to how we talk through the case and let each person at the brief have their say. There's a little bit of science, by the way. If everybody at least says their name in the brief, all members of the team, they're much more likely to speak up later.
Yes.
Yes.
And if they each share their um, mental model of what's about to happen, so there's an art form there that makes everything not only feel, but the evidence says it is safer later on in the event that things deviate from the plan or whatever.
Right. So you mentioned the International Committee for NOTS CL. So you
Yes.
respond to requests, or do you proactively say that, let's go to Israel, Palestine, or whatever? I mean, I'm just
We
taking names.
we will explore every queries and see how we can make things work. We will also want to, you know, go and ask, do you want this? Do you want not? Do you want this or not? Do you want this or not? But sometimes we also feel that we're a bit overwhelmed. Uh, we the amount of query that we get is actually quite enormous, isn't it, Ken?
Yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, in a good way. It's a good problem to have.
yes, 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 yes. It's a good problem. It's a good problem. It's a happy problem.
But I would
So
agree.
yeah. So we want to do this, and we are also trying to expand our own capability. We are trying to engage more people to help us with this as well.
Right.
Um,
Because
yeah.
I think, I've had a fantastic experience approaching you people and then starting it at least with our association in India. And we've had about 3 or 4 courses here. And so, of course, the response was great. And as you said, facilitation was possible. And I mean, guess to all those who attended, it has made an impact, and we've always got good feedback on that.
Can I just say that, as you know, Sadiq, we're in maybe 25 countries now, and we have these levels of engagement. The first being invited masterclasses, but we are keen to move on to level two, where you develop your own faculty,
Yeah.
and level three, even where, like Malaysia, making your own videos. But our preferred approach has been um, what you did, which was to come on behalf of an association um, that has the leverage to to make the most from this partnership and to make a real
Engage a
partnership
lot of people, actually.
and
Yes.
yeah, and also to make it not such that it's simply our product, but over time it becomes a co-produced.
One other important aspect I want to discuss, because the social skills, which is teamwork, leadership, and so on, uh, you know, I realize that there is a lot of, it is influenced by a lot of regional practices. I mean, we talk of hierarchy in India. If there's a senior person and a first year resident, the first year resident, whatever you say, whatever freedom you give, there is uh, they don't speak out, or they would not contradict. Similarly, amongst the staff, there is a hierarchy that the nursing staff may not be as emphatic and vocal as they are probably in Europe and so on. So the cultural part, how do you, when you're NOTSS International, do you account for that? That we are going to this country and this is the kind of culture which we are. I mean, say, for example, you go to Japan and there, the next person is not going to lift his head up due to respect and all what is demanded of that culture. So, how do you sort of, when you're doing NOTS International, you sort of account for this cultural differences, and do you incorporate that in your course? Ken and then CL.
Yeah, I think this is really important. And I mean, my experience has been across Europe, but also in the Arab world and in Nepal and to some extent in India. And of course, you see different cultural settings. It's important that we deliver an education that's grounded in human behavioral science, which actually may transcend cultural differences, but also that we don't assume the same barriers or problems exist and the solutions will be the same, and that we go with curiosity as to what are the particular variations or barriers to safety and solutions that might apply. So often we're asking the group itself to come to those conclusions and generate discussion, which I hope is
Yeah.
already in a respectful, safe environment where junior trainees feel empowered to give an opinion alongside the senior people and so on, regardless of those variations. So, for example, if we're talking about a hierarchy, as you raised, in our setting, we said that there's some good features to hierarchy in crisis situations, but there in many situations it can inhibit speaking up
Yes.
and listening up is another skill for the recipient. And we have, in our situation, an appropriate solution to suggest is using first name terms as a way of flattening hierarchy and changing the culture. In another situation, Sadiq, you can comment if it's yours, that might seem ludicrous. And in fact, calling the boss sir or madam might actually be quite not only respectful, even affectionate or endearing anyway. And it might be more problematic, very problematic to use first name terms. So we have to seek the local solutions, but this is grounded in the behavioral science is pretty much the same across the human race.
Yeah.
We're in this because to err is human.
Yes.
I think that's what I would say that, but we certainly don't want to have the cultural arrogance to come in with a course that's been developed in one setting and not have any recognition of the cultural setting that we come to. I mean, that would be just imperialistic almost.
What do you feel, CL, since you have done it in the Southeast Asian culture? Uh,
I would say that since you have brought up the issue of the topic of hierarchy, I must say that the issue of hierarchy is not. I mean, a lot of people say, "Oh, it's Asian culture and so on," but Ken will have to agree with me that it's everywhere in the world, uh,
Mhm.
even in the States, America. they have their own problem with hierarchy as well. But to your question, how do I tailor and so on? But I must say that I'm also learning, because different places I go and even different part of India, different part of Malaysia, the different group of attendees, I need to sort of judge, and I will start to talk to them how, especially if the group of attendees are the senior consultants, and see how they take this. At the end of the day, my message to them is, whatever it is, at the end of the day, the most important thing is the patient safety. If the hierarchy is this the thing that they're doing because of hierarchy and everything, is going to jeopardize the safety of the patient, then hierarchy is never good. That is, at the end of the day, ultimately that's not the message. So
I feel it's not about how you address or
yes,
what you address people as, but it's important to be able to, you know, uh, step up and say if you feel that there's something which is off the track. I mean, that kind of freedom and encouragement people should get that, I think that's because if we expect people to address at least in India by first name, that's going to be another century or so. So, finally, as leaders of knots that you are, uh, what would you like uh, countries and medical councils to do? What are your recommendations as far as knots is concerned? Should it be part of their curriculum? Should it be mandatory? How should it be implemented?
the thing about Malaysia is, when we started this course, we sort of has a certain strategy. We needed to have a buy-in from the policymaker, the senior consultants, the head of service, and so on. So we introduced this course to them, and we managed to convince them. And thankfully, at that time, we managed to get the support from the national head of service, the person who in charge with, especially the Ministry of Health, because the Ministry of Health provide the nearly 90% of the surgical service in the country. And he instructed, so in life, it's either you give a carrot or you give a stick. So that time, he instructed all the consultant in Ministry of Health should come, and he kept asking us to organize this. And I would say probably we managed to cover about 70 to 80% of the senior consultant of the whole country.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, then we slowly uh, start to run courses for the trainees. And about 5 years ago, the national curriculum of postgraduate training in general surgical surgery have mentioned that the general surgical trainee are mandatory to attend this course before they are allowed to sit for their exit exam. Non-technical skill is more than what is happening in operation theater. We can, like one of the questions you mentioned, you asked just now, how do we impact and what difference does it make? I'm sure all of you all realize that a lot of these skills, after coming to this course, they somehow you learn, and then you do apply in elsewhere. In the operation, in the emergency department, in the ward round, in the clinicing setting, even when I'm trying to deal a crisis at home, how do I speak to my wife and so on. It's important. It's a very important skill in life, but in medical education. But it, I believe if this should be, because this has not been really formally taught in our education, in the medical education. It's probably just one topic or just a paragraph somewhere, or just a sentence during one lecture during MBBS. But believe this should be taught formally, and as it goes by in someone's medical career, it should be emphasized during their specialty training. Yeah. What do you think, Ken?
Yep. I think if there was a drug or a device that could have the impact on patient safety and on team well-being that this has, that's been validated in the way it has, you would never operate without it, and being in the curriculum would be mandated. I think that the minimum that works, I think, as Sadiq, as you said, is to have an introduction to the concepts at undergraduate level.
Yeah.
I think that's starting to happen. I think an introduction with a specific surgical or other specialty appropriate slant can be done in residency or early years residency training, or we call core training. We're starting to become happy with the structure we've got with the introductory version at the start of core training, some simulation late in core training. A NOTSS masterclass in senior years of training. What we are lacking at the moment, which is perhaps better developed in some American centres and in some other specialties, is team training and simulation in the senior years to train the whole team together in scenarios, particularly infrequently met scenarios.
I mean, I strongly feel that the Medical Council or the National Medical Council, as it is in India now, has the power and the ability to mandate it to be had for all surgical trainees. I think the route which you took to call them, sensitize them, tell them the importance of that. I mean, the ministers and who are the
Yes.
decision makers. And then it's very easy, even if it's a lopsided decision, they are happy to take if they're convinced about it. But that may be the route. But I also feel that, it could be mandated that if you are going to get a consultant position, you may be required that you've got this thing, because it sort of reflects on how you're going to do rest of the things. And all of these are mandatory for you to, have a good team, which you'll be leading or be part of. So I think at least in these areas, it could be mandated. I don't know whether it would be in our setup and how easy or difficult it would be, but I must say, CL, as you've done a
Yeah.
fantastic
Not
approach
not
to
Hats off
getting
to
it
not
you.
done in.
not myself. Is everyone else in the team in
Yeah,
Malaysia?
yeah, it's always like that.
Well done.
Uh, I mean, as I said, it's a love which I have developed, and it's so interesting to talk about this with you all who have sort of taken a lead into this. So thank you so much for being on this podcast and sharing your thoughts and insights. I think it's at least made it very enjoyable for me, and I'm sure it will be for the listeners. Thank you very much once again.
No, thank you, Sadiq. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you as well, Sadiq.